We begin in Canada, where the results of the nation's 45th federal election, held on Monday, April 28, 2025, have crystallized. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party is set to retain power, securing a fourth consecutive term, albeit likely forming a minority government, according to projections and results reported late Monday and into Tuesday, April 29th. The election saw the Liberals fend off a challenge from Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives amid a campaign heavily influenced by U.S. relations and President Trump's rhetoric. Notably, new Democratic Party leader Jagmeet Singh, who faced scrutiny over alleged pro-Khalistan leanings, lost his seat and announced his intention to step down as party leader following the NDP's poorer-than-expected showing. The confirmation of a Liberal minority government signals continuity but also potential instability, requiring cross-party cooperation to govern effectively. The election outcome, achieved despite significant external pressure from the U.S., suggests Canadians prioritize stability but also registered discontent, reflected in Conservative gains. Focus now shifts to how Carney's government will navigate demanding economic conditions, manage the sensitive U.S. relationship, and potentially adjust domestic policies, including immigration, in response to the electoral mandate and ongoing national debates. Singh's departure also opens a period of transition and soul-searching for the NDP. Following up on the Canadian election, reports on Tuesday, April 29, 2025, suggest the re-elected Liberal government under Mark Carney is poised to adjust Canada's immigration policies. Campaign platforms and statements acknowledge that previous immigration levels had grown at an unsustainable pace, straining housing and social infrastructure. While details remain forthcoming, the Liberals indicated a need to adjust the numbers and suggested that immigration caps implemented by the previous government would likely remain until housing capacity expands. They also proposed increasing targets for Francophone immigration outside Quebec, aiming for 12% by 2029. These anticipated policy shifts reflect a significant response to public concern over housing affordability and infrastructure strain, potentially marking a move towards more managed immigration levels after years of expansion. Balancing economic needs for labor with social capacity pressures will be a key challenge for the new government. The emphasis on Francophone immigration signals a continued commitment to Canada's bilingual identity. While adjustments to temporary resident programs could significantly impact international students and temporary workers, requiring careful implementation to avoid disrupting key sectors. Turning to the United States, Tuesday, April 29, 2025, marks 100 days since President Donald Trump began his second term, an occasion the White House is using to emphasize its aggressive immigration crackdown. Reports highlight recent large-scale federal raids targeting undocumented immigrants in states like Colorado and Florida, alongside efforts to deport families, including U.S. citizen children with their undocumented mothers. Actions defended by officials as keeping families together during removal, but drawing sharp criticism from rights groups. Furthermore, Republican lawmakers are reportedly pushing legislation to grant the president authority to levy substantial fees, potentially $1,000 or more, on asylum applications and targeting sanctuary city policies. The administration's intense focus on immigration enforcement and border control within its first 100 days signals this issue remains a core priority, likely aimed at solidifying its base and fulfilling campaign promises. However, the aggressive tactics, including the separation or swift deportation of mixed-status families involving U.S. citizen children, raise significant legal and ethical concerns, prompting backlash and legal challenges. Proposed asylum fees could create insurmountable barriers for vulnerable individuals seeking protection, effectively curtailing access to asylum processes established under domestic and international law. Relevant to the current U.S. political climate, the conservative policy blueprint known as Project 2025, though developed prior to the current term, continues to draw attention as reported on April 28th and 29th, 2025. This detailed plan outlines a radical reshaping of the U.S. federal government, advocating for the consolidation of executive power, dismantling agencies like the Departments of Education and Homeland Security, rolling back environmental regulations to favor fossil fuels, and curtailing the independence of scientific bodies like the NIH. It also proposes policies aligned with the Christian right, such as criminalizing abortion medication access, removing LGBT protections, eliminating DEI programs, and utilizing the military for domestic law enforcement, including mass deportations. While Project 2025 is a policy roadmap from conservative groups, not official administration policy yet, its tenets resonate with some actions and rhetoric observed during the first 100 days of Trump's second term, particularly concerning executive power and immigration. Its existence provides a framework for understanding potential future policy directions should the administration choose to adopt its recommendations more fully. The blueprint's radical proposals across nearly every sector of government represent a potential profound shift in American governance and society, making its study critical for anticipating future political battles and policy changes. Tensions between India and Pakistan remain extremely high, with cross-border firing along the Line of Control, LOC, in Kashmir continuing for a fifth consecutive day as of Tuesday, April 29, 2025. These ongoing ceasefire violations follow the deadly April 22 terrorist attack in Pahalgam that killed 26 tourists. Pakistan's defense minister further escalated rhetoric around April 28, claiming an Indian military incursion was imminent. India, holding Pakistan responsible for the Pahalgam attack, has responded militarily along the LOC, banned numerous Pakistani YouTube channels citing propaganda, and is reportedly reviewing options under the Indus Waters Treaty, a move that could severely impact Pakistan's water resources and economy. The unabated exchange of fire and high-level inflammatory statements create a perilous situation between the nuclear-armed neighbors, significantly increasing the risk of miscalculation and wider conflict. The suspension or alteration of the Indus Waters Treaty, a long-standing agreement, would represent a major escalation with potentially devastating economic and humanitarian consequences for Pakistan, further poisoning relations. This ongoing crisis highlights the deep-seated mistrust and the fragility of peace in the region, demanding urgent international attention to de-escalate tensions. In a major geopolitical development, Russian President Vladimir Putin, on Monday, April 28, 2025, publicly confirmed and praised the combat participation of North Korean troops alongside Russian forces in the Kursk region. This official acknowledgement from Moscow coincided with North Korea confirming the deployment, justifying it under the Mutual Defense Clause of their June 2024 Strategic Partnership Treaty. The move follows Ukraine's earlier incursion into Kursk and signifies a marked deepening of military ties between the two isolated states. Putin's open validation of North Korean military support provides Russia with needed manpower on the battlefield, but sends alarming signals internationally. It flagrantly challenges UN sanctions against North Korea's military cooperation and arms exports, solidifies a growing anti-Western axis, and further complicates efforts towards peace in Ukraine. This deepening alliance could embolden both regimes, potentially altering security calculations, not only in Europe but also critically in Northeast Asia, increasing regional instability. Regarding the war in Ukraine, Russia announced on April 28, 2025, a unilateral temporary ceasefire proposal scheduled for May 8th to 10th, ostensibly to mark Russia's Victory Day. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky swiftly dismissed the offer on the same day as an attempt at manipulation, suggesting Russia would likely use the pause to regroup and prepare for future assaults, similar to actions during previous truce periods. Meanwhile, Russian attacks continued, with strikes reported on Kyiv and significant casualties from earlier attacks in Kryvyi Rih confirmed around April 28-29, alongside reports of Russian forces capturing the village of Basivka in Sumy Oblast. The proposed ceasefire, framed around a Russian national holiday, is viewed with deep skepticism by Ukraine and its allies, seen less as a genuine peace overture and more as a tactical ploy or propaganda move by Moscow. Zelensky's immediate rejection reflects the profound lack of trust and the reality of ongoing intense combat. Russia's continued aerial bombardments and incremental ground advances underscore the brutal nature of the conflict and the dim prospects for a negotiated settlement in the near term, while Ukraine continues to rely on Western support to sustain its defense. The situation in the Gaza Strip remains dire, with Israeli military operations, particularly focused around the southern city of Rafah, continuing through Monday, April 28th and Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. Reports indicate ongoing strikes across the Strip, resulting in dozens of Palestinian casualties daily. International pressure continues to mount on Israel concerning the humanitarian catastrophe, aid access limitations, and the potential for a full-scale offensive in Rafah, where over 1 million displaced civilians are sheltering. Legal challenges related to Israel's conduct, including accusations of genocide and aid blockades, are actively being considered at the International Court of Justice. The unrelenting conflict and dire humanitarian conditions in Gaza represent a profound crisis demanding immediate international action. The intense focus on Rafah carries the risk of exacerbating the catastrophe immeasurably if a large-scale ground invasion proceeds. Growing legal challenges at the ICJ and increasing diplomatic pressure reflect global outrage but have yet to translate into a cessation of hostilities or adequate aid delivery, leaving the civilian population in an increasingly desperate and perilous state. Reflecting on the global human rights landscape, Amnesty International released its annual report on Tuesday, April 29, 2025, painting a grim picture. The report warns of a multiplicity of assaults on the international system of law and human rights, arguing these destructive trends have accelerated, partly attributing this to the Trump effect following his return to power in the U.S. Amnesty specifically accused Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, highlighted widespread sexual violence by paramilitary forces in Sudan's civil war, which has displaced 11 million internally, and pointed to severe crackdowns on women's rights in Afghanistan and Iran, and anti-LGBTQ+ measures in several African nations and echoes in Europe. Amnesty's stark assessment underscores a deeply concerning global trend towards the erosion of human rights protections and international legal norms. The report links specific crises, like those in Gaza and Sudan, to broader patterns of impunity, state repression, and the dismantling of gender justice efforts globally. It serves as an urgent call to action for international bodies and civil society to defend established human rights frameworks against increasing authoritarian tendencies and disregard for international law, stressing the interconnectedness of these global challenges. In the South China Sea, the Philippine government issued strong denials around April 28th to 29th, 2025, refuting claims by China that it had seized Sandy Cay, Pagasakais, a disputed feature near Philippine-held Thitu Island. National Security Council officials labeled Chinese Coast Guard reports as fake news and propaganda intended to intimidate. Manila asserted its continued presence and monitoring of the area, highlighting the ongoing sovereignty dispute. This sharp exchange underscores the persistent maritime tensions between Manila and Beijing. China's assertions, even if denied, contribute to a climate of instability and mistrust in the vital waterway. The incident highlights the challenges smaller claimant states face in countering disinformation and gray zone tactics employed by China, reinforcing the need for robust verification mechanisms and assertive diplomacy to uphold maritime rights under international law. Moving to international diplomacy, foreign ministers from the BRICS group of nations concluded a two-day meeting in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on April 28th to 29th, 2025. A primary agenda item was coordinating a response to perceived aggressive U.S. trade policies and tariffs. While drafting a joint statement, officials emphasized strengthening economic cooperation within the expanded bloc. Notably, Brazilian officials denied any discussion of creating a common BRICS currency, clarifying that talks focused instead on developing alternative payment platforms to reduce costs and potentially bypass dollar dominance in certain transactions. This meeting reflects the BRICS nations' ambition to carve out a more influential role in global economic governance and provide a collective counterweight to Western economic policies. While unity on specific actions against U.S. tariffs may prove challenging, the focus on alternative financial mechanisms signals a long-term strategic goal to reduce reliance on traditional Western-led institutions and the U.S. dollar system. From Vatican City, it was formally announced recently that the papal conclave to elect the successor to the late Pope Francis will commence within the Sistine Chapel on Wednesday, May 7, 2025. This sets a definitive timeline for one of the most significant events in the Catholic Church, following the Pope's passing and the interim sede vacante period. Cardinals from across the globe will gather under conditions of secrecy to deliberate and vote for the next leader of the world's 1.3 billion Catholics. The setting of the conclave date initiates a period of intense focus and speculation worldwide. The outcome will determine the future direction of the Catholic Church on critical theological, social, and pastoral issues, potentially influencing global conversations on topics ranging from social justice to interfaith dialogue for decades to come. In Hong Kong, 4 prominent former pro-democracy lawmakers and activists, Gary Fan, Leung Kwok Hung, Lam Chuk Ting, and Helena Wong, were released from prison on Tuesday, April 29, 2025, after serving more than 4 years. They were convicted under the controversial national security law imposed by Beijing in 2020 for their roles in an unofficial primary election deemed subversive by authorities. Their release marks the completion of sentences for some of the most high-profile figures targeted in the crackdown that effectively silenced the city's pro-democracy movement. While their release fulfills their sentences, it occurs within a vastly changed political landscape in Hong Kong, where dissent is heavily restricted under the national security law. Their freedom offers little indication of a broader political thaw, and concerns remain high regarding the erosion of civil liberties and autonomy promised under the One Country, Two Systems framework. Regional cooperation was the focus in Southeast Asia, as Malaysia hosted ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, AITRR, consultations on Monday, April 28th, and Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. The meetings centered on advancing the right to development within the ASEAN community and formulating the AICHR's next 5-year work plan, 2026-2030. Discussions included Malaysia's proposal for an ASEAN declaration on promoting the right to development and peace. These consultations represent an ongoing effort within ASEAN to develop regional human rights mechanisms and address development issues collectively. However, progress often faces challenges due to the bloc's principle of non-interference and varying levels of commitment among member states. The effectiveness of these initiatives will depend on translating discussions into concrete actions that genuinely promote and protect human rights across the diverse region. In Europe, the 3Cs initiative, 3SI, a forum focused on enhancing connectivity and cooperation among countries located between the Baltic, Adriatic, and Black Seas, held its 10th anniversary summit in Warsaw, Poland, on April 28, 29, 2025. Leaders gathered to review a decade of progress on priority projects in energy, transport, and digital infrastructure, and to set the strategic direction for the initiative's next decade, aiming to further strengthen North-South connections within Central and Eastern Europe. The 3SI has emerged as a significant platform for regional infrastructure development, often viewed as a way to counterbalance East-West dependencies and enhance energy security, particularly in light of Russia's aggression. The summit's focus on future plans highlights the continued strategic importance attributed to this region for European integration, economic growth, and security, attracting interest from partners like the US and the EU. Regarding US-China relations, a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs explicitly denied on Monday, April 28, 2025, that any recent phone calls had occurred between President Xi Jinping and US President Donald Trump, refuting earlier remarks attributed to Trump. The spokesperson also reiterated that no consultations or negotiations regarding tariffs were currently underway between the two nations. This firm denial from Beijing underscores the ongoing tensions and lack of high-level communication between the world's 2 largest economies, particularly concerning trade disputes. It suggests that despite any informal remarks, official dialogue channels remain stalled, leaving significant trade disagreements unresolved and contributing to global economic uncertainty stemming from the friction between Washington and Beijing. In bilateral developments, the Philippines and Japan signed an agreement on Tuesday, April 29, 2025, establishing a $150 million, upwards $2.6 million USD scholarship program. This initiative aims to foster human resource development and strengthen ties by providing educational opportunities for Filipinos, likely focusing on fields relevant to bilateral cooperation. Educational exchange programs like this serve as important tools for soft diplomacy, building people-to-people connections, and long-term goodwill. This agreement reinforces the deepening strategic partnership between Manila and Tokyo, contributing to skilled workforce development in the Philippines while solidifying Japan's role as a key development partner in the region. Reinforcing defense ties, the United States deployed advanced Animasis anti-ship missile systems to Batanes in the northern Philippines, confirmed around April 27 to 29, 2025, as part of the ongoing Balikatan joint military exercises. The Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System provides mobile, land-based anti-ship capabilities. Its placement in Batanes, strategically located near Taiwan and the Luzon Strait, sends a strong signal regarding U.S. commitment to Philippine defense and regional maritime security. This deployment enhances the defensive posture of the Philippines and the interoperability between the two allies, but is also likely viewed by China as a provocative move within a highly contested area, potentially contributing to heightened military tensions in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait vicinity. Finally, we look at the situation in Sudan, where the devastating civil war, ongoing since April 2023, has created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Amnesty International's report, released April 29, 2025, highlighted that the number of internally displaced people has reached a staggering 11 million. The report also detailed horrific accounts of widespread sexual violence against women and girls committed by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, amounting to war crimes and possible crimes against humanity. The sheer scale of displacement and the horrific reports of atrocities underscore the catastrophic failure to protect civilians in Sudan. The ongoing conflict continues with impunity, creating immense suffering and destabilizing the wider region. Urgent international action is needed to halt the violence, ensure humanitarian access, and pursue accountability for war crimes to prevent further tragedy.